What is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me for a very special edition of Fantasy MLB Today. It is 500. I have somehow gone on 500 different days of this show now at this point. I cannot even believe it, but I wanted to say off the top, thank you to all of you who have been here, from if you've come from the beginning or if you found me along the way somewhere, everybody who has come on the show, anybody who has shared it out through links on Twitter or anywhere else. I really appreciate all the support. I could not do it without you guys. We have a couple of very special guests on the show to help me celebrate today. Eno Sarris and Nick Pollack. Eno's first time on the show. Nick has been here a few times, but I wanted to get them together here to celebrate this milestone episode. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really do appreciate it.
Congrats, man. 500.
Yeah,
That
well
is
done.
Oh my gosh. They say that it's not a real podcast until you have 10. So 500 is unbelievable. Really, that's such an achievement. Congrats, Joe.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Doing one every single day, they kind of rack up, and you kind of forget after a while. They just kind of rack up on you. But 100 weeks, 5 episodes every single week. Here we are after 2+ years of doing this now. But we have Eno and Nick here, so we are going to be talking about their specialty. We're going to be talking about second baseman going after pick 700. Yes! You guys can target. No, we are, of course, going to be talking about starting pitcher rankings. We have rankings that have come out just yesterday from Nick. Eno's came out last week. Mine are going to be coming out probably next week, maybe the week after. I'm still fine-tuning a couple things, but we have 10 pitchers, actually 9 pitchers that we are going to be discussing here in depth in a minute. I do want to give you guys a chance, just in case anybody has been living under a rock and they've crawled out under to listen to this show. Let them know what you got going on. Eno, let's start with you.
I've got a Bay Area beer guide coming out pretty soon. That's what I'm working on right now because there's a beer gala Friday night that I'm going to attend. That'll be fun. And then our draft kit is coming out soon. So I've put together my 5 young breakout starting pitchers, and next come my 5 deep starting pitchers. So all that stuff's coming out in the next couple of weeks over at the Athletic.
Absolutely. Go follow Eno on Twitter at Eno Sarris. You probably already are, but in case you aren't, go follow him over there. You'll get all of his work. Mr. Pollack, what is going on at Pitcher List?
Well, first and foremost, I'm doing a podcast with this guy somehow.
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
It's because of Joe, by the way, the craft exists from a conversation in First Pitch, Arizona. So thank you, Joe, for making that happen. And then Eno sitting down to me, like, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, what? So yeah, we're doing that, which is pretty fun. We have a 3rd episode now out, and actually we were going to talk about Justin Verlander today, but we talked about him for like 20 minutes there, so we felt we should talk about someone else here today. But yeah, just put out my top 400. Too many words. 400. Split them all up so it doesn't crash on your phone.
Try hard.
Sorry. Well, you know what? If I'm going to do one thing, I got to do it better than anyone else, right? Or at least more words than anyone else.
That's preposterous.
I don't do beer things. I don't do hitter things. Okay, this is it. So we've got that. We also have our new PLV stats coming out. We have already mistake rate on the site right now, which is amazing. We have striker, that is strike minus ICR rate, coming out next week. We have career data next week too on our player pages. We did a reorganization of a lot of the stats to make them better for you. So definitely check out our player pages. I think every single year we just constantly make it better and better and more helpful for you. So that's a really fun thing that we're doing right now. But yeah, just excited. It's fantasy baseball season. Let's go.
Absolutely. Pitcher List is a go-to site. It's become more of a go-to. Every single month I use it more and more as I get more used to the player pages. Still using Fangraphs, but both of those sites are definitely where you should be going to check everything out. I still can't believe that a random conversation that Eno and I happened to have, I think we were outside walking over to listen to Bubba and the Bloom, and it was just a random thought about you two doing a podcast together. And here we are a few months later. I'm glad I could play a very tiny role in that all coming together. But it's great to have you both here. It's great to talk some pitching. Pitching is obviously the specialty of everybody in the room. Obviously, me much less than these two guys. But pitching is still what I tend to focus on more so than position players. I used to be a pitcher myself, so that's where I tend to focus on, and it usually is quote unquote specialty of mine. So let's get into it. Let's talk all of these pitchers that we have slight different rankings of. I try to go where there's at least a 5 or 10 spot difference between us. And I was thinking that the guy who is the biggest outlier between us will start off. We're going to start off with Bobby Miller. Eno and I are fairly close in our rankings. Bobby Miller is 19th for Eno, 21st for me, and Nick has him all the way up at 13. Nick, justify this. He's nearly an SP1 for you. What are you seeing in Bobby Miller? Is it the stuff? What is it exactly?
Okay, hold on a second. I just want to make sure we're clear here. This is not going to be one of those justifications of like, I'm right, you're wrong. I don't do that. What I do is say, Eno, I don't understand how I'm 6 spots higher than you still. I just don't get it. This is Eno's guy, not mine. So no, look, last year when he came up, I actually remember talking about all of the young pitchers and just saying Bobby Miller is going to be the one I want the most next year. He's just the most complete one. He has everything you'd want from high velocity to good pitch shape on it as well. A fantastic situation in Los Angeles. A devastating slider that has yet to actually be as effective, or at least reach the potential that we think it will. A curveball that he throws for strikes. There's also a developing changeup in there too that actually at times has been really good. It was a low strike rate last year, but the games that it actually was utilized well, it's beautiful. It's just a complete package, and with a very high floor, I think, of performance, especially given how effective those fastballs are. He could be throwing more high four seamers, and it should be that way. I don't know why the Dodgers are just like, high four seamers. We're not with that. I see this consistently across their pitchers, which is kind of strange to me. The slider should improve, get more strikeouts there. The biggest pushback I've seen about Bobby Miller, which is very reasonable, is the expected workload, considering we all anticipate a 6-man rotation in Los Angeles. I'm willing to wager that Bobby Miller is the one that actually throws the most innings for the Dodgers this year, as you have Yamamoto on a 10-year deal now, and who's not acclimated, I think, as much as Bobby Miller is, who's pretty much just let loose last year in the rotation, and now it's the year that we normally expect him to just go every 5 days. You have Tyler Glasnow's sister, you have Walker Buehler being stunted at the beginning, or stinted, whatever you want to use there. Regardless, I kind of see a situation where Bobby Miller is just kind of like coasting the entire season and has a much better striker rate than I think the 23-24% he had last year. I just think it's so safe, and I'm a big fan of it.
So are you buying the projections, which are generally like a 3.8 kind of ERA? Does that sound right to you, or do you think he's actually better? I guess based on your ranking, you think he's probably going to surpass that.
I have such a weird thing with projections where, like, I think at the top levels I'm always higher, and then at the bottom levels I'm always lower. So like 3.8 to me, I would honestly be dissatisfied with that with projections for Bobby Miller. I just think he's too good to do that.
What do you think of that projection 3.8? And also, I know you've been doing some early drafts. Bobby Miller's going around pick 72, 73. Does that feel too rich to you, or does that feel about right?
I haven't gotten a share yet because it's a weird spot in the draft, because I sort of identified a top 5 that I think, in starting pitching, and then I'm not always like I'm not always like going for my second starting pitcher yet, or I like wait and I get 2 before him. So I haven't, just the way snake drafts work, I haven't gotten one. I want to get 1 or 2. I said at I said at first pitch that I wanted to, I wanted to crack him open and smear him all over my chest. I don't I was just
that's exactly what it was. Yeah, pretty much.
I was just very excited about Bobby Miller for all the reasons that you said. We have been working with projections with Jordan Rosenblum that use Stuff Plus, and have got a 3.49 projection on him. And more importantly, or as importantly, a 25% strikeout rate, just below a 25% strikeout rate, which I think is the big thing he didn't show last year, but he did show in the minors. I think that's coming. For me, the only reason he was down there, and he's actually currently now 16th, because these things move around as the season approaches. The only reason I was worried was innings. And I can buy what Nick is saying, but I will say that the Dodgers leader in innings last year was Clayton Kershaw with 130 innings. So Bobby Miller could lead the Dodgers in innings this year. He could coast relative to other Dodgers. He could be the main guy, and he could get 140 innings.
Sure.
Which in today's environment is okay, but My top 10, I think the lowest I've got is 186 projected from Pablo Lopez, or 185 from Spencer Strider. So I kind of expect a little bit more from a top 10 guy. That's just why he hasn't gotten all the way to top 10.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit down on him, I guess, relative to the price is really what brings me down in terms of where I have him ranked. I have him below Snell, I have him below Scooble, Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Gallen. I just don't feel as confident with Miller. I think part of it is the 6-man rotation, and maybe it's 130, 140 innings, but at the price I'm paying for him, it's SP2 and 130 innings where the strikeout rate is good, but even 25%, I can outdo that with Grayson, with Tariq Skubal, with Blake Snell, with a lot of those guys in that range. I think
True.
Nick is calling me out, but let's hear it, Nick. Let's hear it.
Why are we saying 130 innings for Bobby Miller?
Well, 6-man rotation. And
that does not mean 130 innings.
Okay, but what is it realistically?
Okay, so like let's
let's
just play this game. This is the game I like to play. Of like 32 starts is a expected 5-man with 6 innings. Okay, so like that would, let's just say that would be about 192. Okay, so then you essentially say 20% less than that or something, right? Because it's so it's like really closer to like 150 is what you're saying for Bobby Miller. If you're saying it's a 6-man all the way through,
a tier below the 180s or whatever.
I understand that. Just want to say 130 is another level underneath, and that's not the case here.
That's more Tyler Glass now,
right? And that's really 110. Let's be honest, 120 is career high. But 100, 6-man rotations. The quote I like to say is 6-man rotations are like the Fellowship of the Ring. Starts off with grand ambitions with lots of people, and it ends with 2 guys barely surviving. So we've before done this in fantasy where we expect a 6-man, all of a sudden it's just gone in the drop of a hat. There are times when it does actually stick around, and it might very well with the Dodgers. They also have some depth options that they can throw in to figure out that 6 if they really want to stick with it.
Yeah, it's not so much a 6-man rotation. It's just like everybody gets rest, and there's always a new announced starter, randomly on Sunday.
I think 150 is kind of like the floor of Bobby Miller is my point. Like I don't see any reason for us to not expect that right now from Bobby Miller.
I projected 162, so like, I'm not expecting 130, but I'm just the 130 was who led the Dodgers last year. Right. That's where we got the 130 from.
The other point is I put out a tweet at the beginning of this offseason saying 15 of the top 31 starters by ADP last year did not make 25 starts. Okay, so like that's okay. That really, like, when we're to interpret that, it's like maybe I should go for Tyler Glass now because of the injury stuff. But when I'm looking at
also
all
make
the
you want
starters,
get healthy guys that are gonna give
right,
you
and like Bobby Miller to me is generally the product of like what we see is like, cool, this is like the rookie ready to stretch out is generally good health, right? That's cool with us, as opposed to the guys who just had that massive workload and then might come back down or something, right? That generally has me just feel so confident. Like I get Bobby Miller, I feel great through the year. I don't feel like, oh man, I'm dealing with a 6-man rotation, or I'm dealing with, like, cool, every week I just put in Bobby Miller, nice and safe, with possibility of being far better than he was last year in both strikeouts and ratios.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. You got to love the team context. The Dodgers, even if it is, a lower number of innings, you're getting, the per inning loveliness of Miller himself. Plus, you're probably going to get more wins than you would from the average guy in that range. The guys that I mentioned, the Scoobals, the Graysons, you're probably going to see at least as many, if not more, wins from Miller. So I see where you're coming from for sure. Let's move on, though, and let's put my friendship with Nick in jeopardy while talking about Cole Ragans. I'm low on Ragans for sure. I have him at number 40 right now, and I'm probably going to have to reevaluate after this conversation. Nick has him up at 14. Eno has him at 28. We're all over the board on Ragans. My thing is that we're dealing with such a small sample size. He had a schedule down the stretch that was pretty favorable, I would say. You're seeing Chicago, the White Sox, you're seeing Pittsburgh, Oakland, not the greatest schedule, I would say. And we did see him kind of fall off at the end in terms of the control. We saw 6 walks against Toronto in that weird start where he was doing the Rick Ankiel routine. We saw a couple of starts to end the season where he had 4 walks apiece. There's definite upside, but there's also the fact that he's a very small sample size pitcher in Kansas City that I don't know if we're going to see a lot of wins or great control from him. So there's just a lot of red flags for me. 40 might be too low, but Nick, I'd want to apologize for this because I know this is a brutal one. But
I always want you to be honest with me. Always be honest with me. I don't want you to sugarcoat things with me. No, I respect you. You respect me, right? And I have the emotional maturity to handle it. But also, how dare you? I look, like with Ragans, I get it. I really do. There's so much risk. There's all the things that we see that are like, oh man, come on. I don't know if you saw, I was doing the Bernie Sanders finger wag at you when you're talking about the strength of schedule, because if there's anything I did last year is I hosted a watch party for every single Cole Ragans game. And I'll be the first one to tell you about, like, it wasn't about the quality of opponent. Like, that guy was, if he was doing his thing, didn't matter. And then it's not really the opponent really.
What did happen in that? Was that there was like he was mad about the mound?
So the mound was really bad with Toronto. You know this. You watched that game in Toronto.
Yeah.
Of course. And really, he had 3 walks at the end of it. He should have been pulled before the inning anyway. This happened twice. Also,
those were not like waste pitches. Those were just like something.
Yeah, that's just completely messed up. And then he had a situation against Houston where he went 6 innings. I ended the stream. I thought he was done. And then he came out in the 7th. Like, why? He's at like 95 pitches right now. What are you doing? And then he walks like 2 guys or something. Actually, I think 3 guys all get on, and then he gets pulled. They wait 3 to do it. I have no idea what's going on. I mean, it's just little things like that. And that's fine. That doesn't really matter for the discourse of Cole Ragans, because it's about, look, it's a small sample size. Can he do that again? All of it. I originally was thinking I was going to put him down to like 23, 24 or so. And I put him inside of the risky aces tier. Like, I'm all about groupings. I even say in the thing, like, look, Kyle Bradish, honestly, good case for him to be my
right
11.
next to Michael King for me.
You know, Kyle Bradish or Cole Ragans?
Cole Ragans.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So and also I actually noted to myself that when I talk to players, like I did the Cole Ragans interview, that I try to even swing the pendulum the other way, because I know that in some way I'm going to believe more about this guy, or I'm going to really feel like, oh no, this is good. And it's just because I haven't talked to everybody. If I talk to everybody, then like I would, they always are going to have faith in what they do and stuff and whatever, like, of course. So I even tried to push it down further. However, the one thing I keep going back to in my head is there was a pitcher I did this for before, where I saw how good they were. It wasn't a good sample. They deserved the success that they had. And I said, yep, the schedule wasn't there. He was just so precise with it, or whatever it was. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And I pushed him too far down and got too burned for it. And that guy was Corbin Burns. And after that 2020 season where he came in and started, and he was just so good and he deserved all that success, but we said, no, too risky, we don't know if this is real opponent, all of this. He was so bad before, et cetera, et cetera. And he made fools of all of us. And I went back to, what have I done in the past of when I've been like super in on a guy and I've been burned by it, and I overlooked some things. Like, I hope no one else remembers this. I get mentioned to it inside by my staff, but like the Zach Godley situation where he was so good for 1 year and then it wasn't very good. I always think about that one. Nick, you were too aggressive. Nick Pivetta in the past, which has changed a little this year for other reasons.
Graham Ashcraft for me.
Ashcraft, sure, I get right, but it's like but with Ragans, I called him the unicorn last year because of just, I don't see this. I don't see a guy with 5 pitches that he commands and executes as he should, right? He is absolutely someone who has an approach with all of them. And I actually expected to go into this interview hearing him just come back, yeah, whatever the catcher kind of puts down, or, I'm really just figuring this stuff out. I don't really know. No, it is unbelievably locked in. He has a notebook. Like, him and Pablo both have notebooks of remembering all these things. Like, this is what I do against this guy. And I told him, I was like, I gotta say, man, why do you love 3-2 changeup so much? I love that you love it. And he started laughing. It's like, it's like, oh, you caught me kind of thing, right? Like, oh man, I didn't realize anyone else noticed that, because that's how he thinks. And it's exactly the right way to this success, right? And I understand the walk stuff that happened in the end of the year. Yep, that was weird. That was strange. I understand there is an injury ding because of his long track record with Tommy John, which really was just like 3 years recovering from one Tommy John. I also understand the increased velocity. It was 1.5. He was rehabbing from the first one, revision, right? Which I think is a completely different thing than like you getting it, pitching, and then like, oh, I got to get it again. Right. That is, to me, that's why I call it 1.5. And he actually called it 1.5. I was like, yes. In my terrible graphic of it, I actually put Tommy John, the player, and then half of Tommy John inside my Cole Ragans graphic for PitchCon. But anyway, to end this long ramble, I just see someone who is there and present and very much doing the right things when it comes to flexibility too, and adapting with it, working with a good organization and Tread that has certainly helped him. And I just think he's too good. I think this is not like a fluke. It can't be that good for so long in that season, that stretch, and just goes away. I don't believe that. So I'm in.
I know you're not quite as in. You're still fairly in. But it doesn't sound like, based on where you have him ranked, and maybe you've moved him around since, but based on where you have him ranked, 110 ADP sounds like you're not going to be getting into the Cole Ragans business much this year.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I do like him a lot, and I don't know. I just have a hard time pushing him ahead of the guys ahead of him, and the reason is just mathematical. Like, we have projections based on Stuff Plus, and they project a 4.40 ERA for him. I don't know why. I actually don't know why. I don't know why. He's in a good
I actually know why.
Why?
Because it's the same thing that kind of happened with us. Like, PLV doesn't love its changeup.
It doesn't love its changeup. Yeah, I was gonna say. Right. I was gonna go there. I was gonna say.
And but ththing is, you told me exactly the thing that has me more in. He has 5 pitches.
Yeah, he has 5 pitches. He doesn't have above average command on all of them. It's the slider and the four seam that for us popped with above average command, but near average on all. And great stuff on a bunch of them. And the changeup, which are the Stuff Plus model doesn't love, which Stuff Plus is based on the physical characteristics of the pitches. It has only like a sort of average-ish velocity gap and movement differential off of his fastball, but it had it gave up like a 0.080 average last year. Like, nobody hit it. And so at some point, there's some point where the results matter more than the model. And he's right kind of at the nexus of that. It's not a big sample. Stuff Plus kills it in really tiny samples, but he's not a really tiny sample. He pitched for like a half a season. So he's somewhere in between where the results matter more and the modeling matters more. And so I pushed him. Like, if you look at my rankings, he has the highest projected ERA of anybody, I think, in the top. Yeah, you have to go down to the 50. Merrill Kelly at 50 to get another 4.40. And so I have Cole Ragans at 30. So I pushed him. It's weird when you like push someone and you love someone, and then you look at the market and you're like, whoa, I guess I don't love him. So that's just been my Cole Ragans experience. Like, I really like him. Like, but if I'm putting Cole Ragans up against Justin Verlander, who I really like, I'm going to take Verlander. It's like a long track record. I've got like Dylan Cease right there. I love Dylan Cease's stuff. Then you start getting into like Joe Musgrove, Max Fried. Like, I don't know. Am I going to push him that high? Like, do you have the ADPs in front of you, Joe? Like, where, like, who's like the would you rather ADP wise when you're taking Cole Ragans? Who are you taking Cole Ragans over by ADP
in terms of the pitchers within about 10 picks of him, you're looking at Justin Steele, Joe Musgrove, Craig Kimbrell, who's a reliever, different story, but Tanner Bybee, Dylan Cease. There's also Clay Holmes in there, Walker Buehler, Sonny Gray. Those are the kind of names going within 10, 20 picks of him.
I take him above those last two, but below the first two. So it's like, I might end up with a share. Like, I might, might sneak him in, but I if you want me to like bust him above Joe Musgrove, I'm not sure I'm going to do that.
Right.
Joe
Musgrove is actually a really good point too. I love Joe Musgrove too.
Yeah. I think some of the stuff last year was a little bit fluky injury wise because he went to Mexico City and it really inflamed like some bursitis he had. He dropped I think he dropped a weight on his toe. Like, it's just like sometimes you have like a lost year and you're just like, okay, let's just get rid of that year and start over,
I think this really showcases how much quality there is. And in 12 teamers for me, I mean, I've said for years, like, hey, I do not want to go for top tier guys. I want to feast like in rounds like 6 through 10 and just get my guys. And like, if you're getting like Musgrove in there too, you're getting like Sonny Gray's great. Like, this is so solid, especially when it comes to hitters dropping off around that point.
I mean, you could theoretically in a 12-teamer get like 3 or 4 bats and go Bobby Miller, Joe Musgrove, Cole Ragans.
It's so good
for your
It's
top
so
3.
good. Amazing.
I mean,
Kyle
it'd be pretty
Bradish
high
in there,
risk,
too.
but
Go
you're
with
also
that.
in a 12-teamer, so like, pick
Throw
up
in
the
Kyle
boring
Bradish, he'll be
old
fine.
guy.
Best slider in the game.
Yeah. Let's move on. That's a lot of Cole Ragans.
Why are you low on him?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, him. Yeah, Joe. Yeah, right. Yeah, of course.
No, it was just like the team context, the small sample size,
No wins.
the fact that
They're going to get better as an offense.
I don't even buy into that so much. Like, how much better are they going to be, though? Really, I buy into it a
not going to be
little
good.
bit. But we're coming from a place where they were so terrible. They lost 100 games last year, didn't they? Like, what are we going to be, a 65, 70 win team this year? I think people have kind of overstated the growth of that offense to some extent.
That's fair. That's very fair. I mean, he's not going to, it'd be very surprising to see Cole Ragans as like a 15+ win guy or something like that.
I always forget about wins, but it matters.
Yeah, double-digit wins, I don't think is. I mean, as long as he's going every 5 days, like he should go 6 innings constantly, and that alone will be like, cool. Double-digit wins should be attainable.
Yeah, but the difference between 10 and 15 in like player ratings at the end of the season, I've noticed it's like
massive.
It drives me up the wall.
You noticed that I noticed it a lot with Sonny Gray last year. He only won 8 games, and the guy like Zach Eflin, who I adore, won 16 games.
Yeah,
that really makes a difference in the way their rankings are going to look at the end of the season. With Ragans, just the way he ended really left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I could probably move him up a couple of spots.
Only
The guys in that range for me are like Hunter Greene, Sonny Gray, Bailey Ober, Chris Bassett.
Don't do Hunter Greene, please. Just don't do that. That if you want to talk about risk, like this is the most. I kept lowering Hunter Greene further and further down just because in a 12-teamer, I just don't want to deal with this. Like it's just going to be painful.
The Park injury history only has 2 pitches.
Like it's just so volatile. It's the perfect encapsulation of a cherry bomb.
Yeah, I think the strikeout upside just has me dreaming on a healthy season from Hunter Greene. The team context is getting a lot better. They're probably arguably the best team in the division right now. The park is bad. The control is still bad. Like there's always going to be a home run problem for him. But I feel like he could be a 3.8 kind of ERA guy who gives me 200+ strikeouts still. I think
that's Hunter Greene.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I like Hunter Greene.
Maybe 39 is aggressive, but I feel like 39 is. I think that's not too bad. Where do you guys have Hunter Greene?
I have 32.
You don't want to know where I have Hunter Greene.
You probably have him in the 50s or something.
It's really past, like it is at least 50.
He's a stuffed monster.
Yeah,
that's the thing is I actually before last year, entering 2023, I had Hunter Greene in my way too early rankings at like 30 because I just saw him. I was like, well, his 4-seamer is Spencer Strider's, isn't it? And what I've realized
is a much worse park and worse command.
Oh, right. Well, exactly. Then before last season, I pushed him down to like 61 because I was like, never mind, I'm out. And what's really nice is learning about pitch shape and fastball shape in particular with our PLV pitches app. And Kyle Bland made that. It's so good. Finally, I have this reference point for this stuff and understanding all these fastballs of old that like I look at it and go like, this should be really good, Wascreen. No, I'm like, oh, you have terrible adjusted VAA. I get it now. Hunter Greene has really bad extension. It goes really hard, terrible extension, and really low extension 4-seamers generally don't perform as well as we want them to. I mean, there's just the idea of like effective velocity in the first place, but also it's just easier to pick up. And they generally are just worse performing pitches. And also turns into usually lower adjusted VAA because they're pitching from behind as opposed to larger out down the hill. Which then makes it so that they have a better angle to the top of the zone. So that explains a ton for me as to why Hunter Greene's fastball is as hittable as it is and why you don't want that for a guy who's not a command plus guy in a home run park. Like this is why you're going to have the volatility constantly.
Stuff Plus has it as a 120 Stuff Plus pitch, one of the better 4-seamers. But I think a lot of that's just velo. Yeah. And when I see those hittable numbers, to me, it's because he's predictable. He's a 2-pitch guy. So I think that if he could just throw a lollipop curve out there, doesn't have to be an actual lollipop, but like if he could just throw a curve out there that sometimes when they expect fastball, they get curve, or sometimes when they expect slider, they get curve. There's something about anticipation that matters. It's like if you are really a small arsenal guy and they can really keyhole you, it can be a really great stuff plus pitch, but they're just ready for it, and they just cheat to it a little bit.
I mean, if you don't mind me saying it, but like Hunter Greene's vert is below average. So that's, it's 14.8. You want to see at least 16 or so. His adjusted VAA is under 1. It's 0.9, which is again like at average or below it. And then the release extension that you want to see like 6.5 or higher, 6.3. So three of those,
it's a 2-plane fastball. So
it's
the vert isn't great, but he has more wiggle than most.
Right, he has more arm side run.
It's not that different from Bobby Miller.
Bobby Miller has great extension.
And
he has more
that part is different. But in terms of like, just if you look at Brooks, for example, and you just look at that movement profile, they both have, this similar sort of vert and horizontal.
And to me, the poster child of like what I really should care about is Zach Wheeler, who is just like a lead extension as four-seamer and good adjusted vert, and that's like one of the best performing fastballs in the game. He also has obviously command of it.
Was Greene on the rundown?
No.
Greene, no. But he's our 10th. He's replacing Verlander. That's what it is.
There you go.
There you go.
Perfect. That's perfect. Look at Nick thinking outside the box. I'm curious, Nick. It sounds like a lot of the concerns with Greene for you. If he was in a neutral or a pitcher-friendly ballpark, how much would that change the equation for you?
I mean, it would definitely to some degree. I just don't think that he has the ceiling that we want him to have because of fastball shape and not pristine command.
Interesting. I'm going to defer to you, and I'm going to switch Ragans and Hunter Greene. I'm going to flip-flop them in my rankings for you.
Don't do it for me. Do it for you, Joe.
No, but you're talking. That's a good thing, right? Because I don't think any of us, like Eno said, his rankings have already changed a little bit since I put this together. They're going to change, and if they're going to change based on influence from you guys, I think that's better than just me reading some random article somewhere.
Right? Don't you guys listening? You don't want us to stick to our guns because that means that we are overlooking anything new that we discover or think about and talking to smart people. Like I've changed things because I've been talking to Eno. When I was talking to Eric Smolsky, like it stinks because I was saying one thing in October or even like a month ago, but like it's gonna happen, and I'm really sorry. But just keep talking to us. That's all we ask.
Yeah, my podcasts go throughout the offseason. My opinions definitely have changed on a few players throughout the offseason, and Nolan Arenado for one. We won't get into that though. Let's keep pitching. Let's talk Max Fried. Max Fried, I happen to be the high man on. I have him at 14. Eno had him at 25, and Nick at 22. I'm a little concerned about what we saw from an injury standpoint last year. He missed time with he had a blister problem, and he's actually had a couple of blister problems in his career. Also, the forearm, he missed time with a hamstring. There's a lot of injuries for Max Fried. I'm kind of just hoping that we can get back to that full season that we've seen him, fairly healthy from the time he was a full-time starter in 2019 through now. It was bad season health-wise. I'm kind of just banking on him being able to throw 27, 28 times in that Atlanta lineup, and then you're looking at 14, 15 wins. He's always been a guy when he's been healthy who's been a low 3s to even high 2s ERA in that kind of ballpark. The strikeouts aren't really there, but he's got great control. The team context is amazing. I'm very, very interested in Fried, and I'm wondering why you guys are, I think, a little bit lower than consensus, both of you, because I feel like the market is going to have Max Fried as a top 20 SP. I might be wrong there, but I feel like he is. Let's start with you, Nick.
Well, it's really hard to rank Max Fried right now. I don't know what to do. I think when he's pitching, and let's say you said, hey, Nick, he's not going to get hurt this year. He's 180 innings or so. And plus, like, I would have him in the top 10. I just think that Max Fried's win totals would be really high, and he's not going to be a 28%, 30% strikeout guy. He's more like a 25%, whatever. But he's a command specialist, and it's great that four-seamer acts like a cutter. The insider righties, it's beautiful. The problem is that he had a strained forearm, which is a tear, and I just don't know if like that's going to last or not. And generally, like, sure, there are times that recovers. Eno was talking about the other day on the craft was that it takes like a year for us to know if that's okay, and you're out of the woods. And I actually originally had him in my risky aces tier, which is where Cole Ragans is at the end. And then I also had him in the shiny squirrels tier, which is right after Free, which starts with Yuri Perez. And I had no idea where to put him. So I just put him in like the ones where it's, I don't know, safe innings when he gets them. But because I can't expect him to go the full season, it's not the same upside of like Tyler Glasnow and you're going to get like 10 strikeouts or something. Like I don't expect that from Max Fried. And the fact that he won't maybe get into a rhythm or something, I don't know. It just weirded me out. And I found myself like, look, I'm just going to go get other guys that I feel like are going to be really good and not have the same ding against them. So put him at 22, but I don't know, man.
You have the same kind of injury concerns, you had him even lower at 25. Have you moved him since?
Yeah. Of MLB players with forearm injuries, let's see here.
I like this.
Subsequent injuries included 37% shoulder, 36% elbow, and 18% forearm injuries. These are major league players.
So is that saying like 20% or 25% are fine?
Yeah, I guess so. But
that's it. So like 75% of them got injured.
Get something else. Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh man, that's such a good stat. If that's what that is, that's
20% of them got Tommy John.
Okay, so that's probably compounded though.
I think that's included in the elbow.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh.
These rates of subsequent injuries are significantly higher compared to the rates of injuries sustained among players without forearm injuries.
Right.
This is a piece from the National Library of Medicine. Peer-reviewed kind of research piece. That's my excuse. One of the real stories of Max Fried is that he's been a model outlier for a long time. He's outperformed his strikeout rate. He's outperformed his stuff plus. He's outperformed his command grades. He's just been he's been a unicorn, and I've been wrong on him every year. I've been consistently putting him in sort of the 30s, and what has he been? 17th, 15th, and 42nd among starting pitchers the last 3 years. And last year was just, injury basically. So I've been wrong. Maybe I'm just being wrong again, but this year I have the injury excuse.
Between the injury and you not liking him to begin with, that's definitely not a great sign. The projections absolutely love him. I am a projections guy generally, and they're really big on him, but they're also, expecting 27 to 31 starts there. So that's where a lot of it comes from. If he is able to throw 27 times this year, I think that he'll probably return value.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's kind of a big question at this point.
Our stuff-based projections are 3/4 of a run higher than the other
ones.
Well,
right. Wow. Because what is Max
Fried's best 396 stuff, but it's like it can't be right. It can't be right. We project a 22% strikeout rate for him. His career is 24. He hasn't had the last time he had a 22.3% strikeout rate, like we projected, was in 11 starts in 2020.
But his best skill isn't stuff, though, right? It's command. That's the thing.
We had a 99 location plus last year. So
really,
I don't think that's been true in the past.
Yeah. I imagine we have the same kind of thing of like wondering about, when it comes to PLV of merging the two.
So does this injury get weighted into the projections at all for you? Is that maybe why the 2% strikeout decline?
I mean, it actually will, because his stuff is probably pre-injury is probably, or around the injury is probably lower than usual.
How many pitches does he have?
3?
No.
You count, okay, so 4. The changeup.
He improved the changeup massively last year and the year before.
Okay.
I would say it's 5 with the sinker.
Let me see what our.
Curveball and slider absolutely in there with the 4-seamer.
It's not always that relevant. What the model thinks. The model thinks that he has 6. 4-seam, sinker, changeup, slider, sweeper, curveball. And it really likes the slider, sweeper, and curveball. Thinks the changeup is pretty good, and it hates his fastballs. That's what it is. It thinks he's a bad fastball guy.
Okay, well, Max Fried, I think I might have to lower him down again. This is part of the discussion. The injury, I didn't realize how dark the outlook was once you had one of those injuries, one of the forearm injuries. So maybe 14 is a little bit high. I guess I'm just in love with the team context and the track record for him.
He's one of 7 players with an ERA under 3 that's thrown 300 innings over the last 3 years. That's a Derek Van Riper special.
I love him. Oh, that's good to have the EVR in here. He's legit to me if it weren't for the injury. Like I would actually probably have him above Zach Gallen, believe it or not.
Wow.
But yeah.
I do have him above Zach Gallen, but that might have to be something that I reconsider after this episode. The rankings are going to be torn apart after this episode. I'm going to have to redo them. Let's move on to Freddy Peralta, where Nick is a little bit lower than Eno and myself. 15 for Eno, 16 for me, and 23 for you, Nick. Were you not buying what we saw down the stretch last year for Peralta? Do you think that maybe he's not going to be able to sustain that incredible second half?
I'm someone who definitely ranks based on anxiety, and I hate volatility as much as I can. And if I do, I do volatility with like later on, and I'm all about decision making, right? So it's easy to forget that last year, like the first 2 months or something like that from Freddy Peralta, we're all just like, well, he's terrible, he's bad,
Got dropped a lot.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden he figured it out in the last 4 months, and he's very cross-body. He steps toward third base, and Freddy Peralta generally has had this routine of, do I have my feel? Do I have not my feel? Is it there? Am I efficient? Am I not efficient? And by the end, he had it, which is cool. He also has a little bit of a track record with health. He also increases velocity by 2 ticks last year that I don't know if is going to be sustainable. And to me, it's not as safe as the others. It's just that simple. I don't really see this being a 180 inning season of that kind of production we saw in the second half. I'm completely understand. Like, look, Nick, we just take what we got last year completely. I think it was like 3.83 ERA in the end, though. If I remember correctly, at the end of the day, I don't like guys who I feel are going to go through ebbs and flows more extremely than others. And it's just too anxiety riddled. I completely understand your rankings. It's just not for me.
You're not as concerned, I don't think.
I had the best strikeout minus walk rate in the second half last year among starting pitchers. And I thought you loved extension.
I do. I know. I do.
But
that makes it so good.
I just see a kind of a guy maturing. He's Freddy fastball, but now he's not. Now he really has a full arsenal. We've got a really nice projected strikeout rate from him, 28%. That's going to get him sort of a tier above the 23s and 24s and stuff. So I think it's just a sort of a culmination of what's going on. The only thing that makes me nervous is the innings, but where I have him, I'm not so. It's more in the sort of 160 tier where, I think he can get to 160.
I could see it. Do you like the price that people are paying for him, which is generally in the early 50s? Does that sound right to you, or a little too expensive maybe?
Who's he up against?
In that range, he is generally going around. There's a lot of relievers in that range, but generally the starters are Aaron Nola, Tariq Skubal, Framber Valdez, Logan Webb.
I mean, that's exactly where I have him. One thing that I will say is that Webb is so risk-free for me.
Yeah.
And I've been a little higher, I think, than on the market on Logan Webb. And I just think in times like these, like if I can buy what I think is going to be 180 innings with so much of it in San Francisco, so much of that changeup, so many ground balls, not non-homers. Like I think he may not have strikeouts. He's like the opposite of Freddy Peralta. If I could somehow double tap Webb and Peralta, I'd feel pretty good.
About Logan Webb, I think he's going to get more strikeouts. I mean, you were mentioning to me last year about like how
he's fiddling with the slider.
Yeah, and the thing is, he still had that successful season last year without really the slider kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely within the realm of possibility that he figures out how to use that slider better.
He had it once before. He had a higher strikeout rate, and he had a better slider once before. So yeah.
So that makes me encouraged, and I'm generally someone that leans more heavily into whether a skill is legitimate or not. And like that changeup from Logan Webb isn't just like an anomaly to me. That's that's his changeup. That is what he does.
So you're just more nervous about Freddy Peralta's new improved slider and
exactly.
I have Logan Webb ranked at 8 right now. I'm very
that's
in
a nice
on Logan
ranking.
Webb. I'm very in on him. Is that higher than you guys?
I have him at 10.
Yeah, it's 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
We're all three of us higher than the market, but
it's just so safe.
Yeah.
Probably have to cut that part out of the episode.
Fuzzy blanket.
Let's move on and talk about somebody who is, again, kind of all over the place in our rankings, and that's Blake Snell. Eno is the high man at 14. I got him at 20, and Nick at 28. Let's start with you, Eno. Any concern about location, potentially where he ends up altering that ranking to some degree?
No.
No, like where he ends up signing. That's
He's
not
like a
gonna impact.
strikeout walk guy. I know he had hit suppression last year, but I don't. I buy him because of all the strikeouts. And to me, the story of the walks, which were worse than usual last year, was he lost his slider early in the year and he threw his pitches he doesn't command as well, the curve and the change more. But I'm going to say that's in long term, outcomes is probably good for him because now he can be more of a 4-pitch guy. He was really becoming a 2-pitch guy before that, and I think him being a 4-pitch guy is better. He won the Cy Young with 4 pitches. And maybe he can back up. He can, bring in the slider more and back up the other guys and the walk rate goes down. I'm not expecting what he did last year. I have a 3.69 projection for him and a 29% strikeout rate. He's a stuff god.
I worry a little bit about where he might end up. Not that it'll alter it to a large extent for me, but I think if it's he's not going to Cincinnati, but if it's Cincinnati versus Seattle or something, it's not going to be that drastic, of course.
But Yankee Stadium, but then he's still a lefty suppressing, those lefty, it's the lefties that kind of bother you in Yankee Stadium.
I have some concerns as well. I mean, this might be more anecdotal than anything else, but about is he going to be able to pitch 180 innings again after his last Cy Young?
That's not anecdotal. I mean, he's got a bunch of seasons with 120. That's
yeah.
I have 172 inning projection, and I've literally got it highlighted as we talk, and I might delete innings off of it as we talk.
Don't say another word. We'll get down to 170.
No, it's already. It's 168. It just happened.
It's really funny, actually. If you guys remember from First Pitch Arizona, the podcast that we did, the reason that Eno joined ours for a moment was because I, at the time, and then this is my early October rankings, which obviously are different now, had, I think, Snell at 33. And Eno had, obviously, problems with this. And we went back and forth and all of this. And I said, well, where do you have him? He said, well, 28. And so fine, I put him at 28. And now
I have him way higher.
No, it's actually kind of funny that it is exactly that ranking that you said back then. With Blake Snell, there's so many ways it doesn't work out. And that's the problem for me, is that there's a lot of explanations for it. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I was the one saying he deserved the Cy Young. And I can explain all the reasons why the 13% walk rate was by design and how he pitched. And we just put out this awesome article, Kyle Bland, talking about mistake rate, which is essentially pitches in the zone that have double the chance of allowing a hit, and who throws those. And that's clearly why they allow more hits and stuff, which is intuitive to everybody. And Blake Snell not only led the league in the lowest mistake rate, but the second guy was 50% higher than Snell, 3% versus 4.5%, right? That's the number 2. That was Yuri Perez. So clearly his mental approach of not giving in is part of the reason why he had a sub-6 hit per 9. Now, a sub-6 hit per 9, when you see that, you should know that is not sticking around. It really just isn't. You don't see that. Sometimes you get lucky and get like 2 sub-7 hit per 9 seasons, but you never see like another 5.8 again. So that's going to regress a little bit. And when I think about the entire season of Blake Snell last year, I remember in the beginning, you're right, exactly. He was trying to do the whole fastball curve slider thing, could not throw the curve and slider for a strike, like just couldn't. And the whole game plan was to say, yeah, we don't like the changeup anymore, Blake Snell. He tried it for like a couple seasons, kept going, dwindling numbers with it. I was the biggest proponent of that. I was saying, stop throwing the changeup. It's clearly worse than the changeup and the curve and slider. But then he had to, like, literally he had nothing else. So he just started throwing his changeup one game. And by surprise, it was great all of a sudden. Like, it was just so good. And then he did it again next game, and it was still really good. And that pitch became the savior of the year. And that is not typical.
Isn't
right?
There do well with what you got that day?
Right. It was then, but then he then actually became like a thing that was good every day, right? With that changeup. But the thing is, the slider still isn't back. Like, it was a sub 50% strike rate. As much as you want to say he's not giving in, like, no, he wants to give in a little more than that. Where a lot of these wasted ones under the plate, under the zone, all of that. And the other assumption that I've had about Blake Snell for a very long time is that his four-seamer dominates. And it doesn't. It really isn't this big whiff pitch. It isn't this incredible fastball shape. It does get really good vert at times. but he doesn't command it as well as I want him to. And he misses very often, especially to right-handers, arm side up and away, and just
really
wastes
poor
it.
command of it.
And this whole thing is like, okay, if you want to tell me your design is to not give in, have a low mistake rate, and to walk everybody, but you also don't have great command, like, I don't quite see that being a reliable thing for a full season, because he didn't do that for about, I don't know, what was it, 6-7 weeks before the season started. It's into the season, rather. It was middle of May, and then he went off in his final 17 or 19 starts having a 1.2 ERA. Like, what? Okay. It's you have to be able to take the good with the bad with Snell. And fortunately, last year the good was like historically good. I mean, it was, you don't see it, right? And I'm not going to bank on that. I'm not going to put myself through that again. Do I think that Snell's going to help your fantasy teams for the entire year? Yes. Can't remember like the last season where you drafted Blake Snell and he did so well in April that you're just happy you drafted him. Like, it just hasn't happened. We were wondering, how long are we going to have to wait for Blake Snell to get it together on April 30th last year? And all of a sudden it worked out. It took until, I think, late June in 2021 to make it work, 2022 rather. It took later in 2021. Like, he is very much of getting in rhythm and it working out for you. It worked out in the best way in a contract year where he threw more consistently than ever, or since 2018. All of these things wrap into a package of, yeah, no, I can't possibly figure out what exactly is going to happen. So we just pushed him down the ranks to 28. Ta-da.
The strangest thing for me is, despite that Cy Young in the contract year, we're 5 months into free agency and he is currently unemployed. Have you heard anything, any rumblings about where you think he might be going, or any?
I mean, I think just our conversation here is probably, then you have to put Scott Boras in the room being like, no, he's the best guy ever. He just won the Cy Young. Come on.
Lowest mistake rate.
200 million. And the analysts in the front office are like, well, I think he's 18. And the other one's, well, no, he's 23.
You haven't heard anything though? No rumors recently about where he might be headed or if he might be signing soon?
I think that San Francisco makes a lot of sense. Maybe not in terms of ethos or vibe, but in terms of having other guys that can come in the fourth inning if he blows up, or if he only gives you 140 innings, then having Tristan Beck to kind of give him a 2-month blow or whatever. Like, they seem like a team that also needs something at the top. Right now it's Logan Webb and Kyle Harrison, and I would much rather have Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell as my number 2. So I think at least one of those guys is going to San Francisco.
It's Jordan Montgomery. This is the right vibe.
Let's hope so for their sake and for our friends Bubba and Justin Mason, that they get something to cheer about over there. Let's talk about Bailey Ober. Nick and I are fairly close. 34 for Nick, 37 for myself. Eno is lower at 48. Now, I've heard people say he's kind of like the George Kirby light. He's very similar to George Kirby in terms of the production you're going to get. Strikeout minus walk rate type of stuff. Why are you lower than Nick and I?
Like, we have a poor stuff number on him. It could just be wrong. There's a little bit something unique about him in that he's really tall, but he doesn't release it up high. So he has like similar release points to people who are like 6 inches shorter than him. And so I think that there might be something unique about the arm angles that you get. Like, you see tall. There's this guy in San Francisco, Sean Hajeli, who's like 6'10" and throws like almost sidearm. So like, you get this weird disconnect where you're like looking up, but it comes out sideways, So I wonder if there's just something I'm missing, but we have a 4.25 ERA projection, a 23% strikeout rate projection. That's not too far. The strikeout rate projection is not too far from what he's actually done, for his career 24.8. But he has a career 3.63 ERA, seems to be beating his K-BB, has beaten his Sierra so far. I don't know, man. I just see the 91 mile an hour velocity, and that lines up with my stuff number. And I hate to be like a basic B, but I'm just like, I'm a guy who says like, it's not always about velocity. I created Stuff Plus to be like, it's not always about velocity. There's other things that matter. And yet this time I'm kind of like, maybe my Stuff Plus number is right. Maybe his stuff is not that good. and maybe he's like a command artist that belongs with other command artists, like your Chris Bassett, Merrill Kelly types, which is where I have him ranked.
Nick, you're a little bit higher. You're even higher than I am on him. What do you think about that Kirby comp? Seems like I got you thinking with that Kirby comp.
Well, the Kirby one was interesting. But no, Kyle Bland will tell you we have our PLV player projections, like our 2.0 now. We had like a beta V1 for everyone before. But the 2.0 came out, and I think it has Bailey Ober inside the top 20, which is wild. I was like, what? This is bonkers. Yeah, extension's a big part of it, obviously, as Eno was saying. I really do believe that his four-seamer command is so good, and it's because that also he's really tall and he's able to just hit that top of the zone so effectively. It's the reason why I called him Bailey Oberizzi, because Yoko Rizzi used to do that thing of painting the top of the zone all in red and four-seamers.
That's why I get 50% fly ball rates.
And it's good. Infield fly balls included in that a ton. Those are lower BABIPs. I think he's not really a massive home run guy. And the fact that the changeup is really good, and the way they releases it, I think it consistently means that this changeup is masked a ton, especially out of his hand. And just those two innately are solid. His sliders sometimes is there, sometimes it's not. But what I see, I called it the Bailey special last year in the roundup, right? It was 6 innings, about 2 earned runs or so, and about 6 to 7 base runners with a strikeout an inning. Like, that's just the Bailey special. Just every day you're gonna get this thing. It's fine, and it has like movement to go up and down. The Kirby comp is interesting. I get it. I'm not as aggressively. I don't really see that happening, because I think for us with George Kirby, there's a lot more excitement about what could be developed.
Yeah, I think
the foundation that
Kirby's
has.
like more likely to jump into like
we think the slider could be better.
Top 3 type player.
The four-seamer is a better pitch. He also has better overall command.
Ober's maxing out right now.
Right, he is kind of maxing out, and I do have worries about Ober. And I was actually thinking about lowering him more. He hasn't really been pushed 180 before. The Twins have been kind of weirded out by making him go 6 constantly, and they finally did it a bit last year, but then he got into some problems and they shut him down. So it does feel like Ober's not ever going to have that 7-inning, 8-inning leash that you really want, but he did, I think, maybe a couple of times last year go 7. I don't know. It just doesn't feel as overwhelming, but I feel at the very least, four-seamer command is so good that there's a higher floor to this than other guys in like the 50s for me, or even the 40s, with a little bit more of a ceiling, especially if it gets a breaking ball that I really like from Ober. That really will be the true Blake Snell blueprint, which I really feel like I should rename at this point, because like Blake Snell doesn't quite even do it as much. He has terrible high location. Blake Snell, it's like sub 40% high lock. Like, no, you're supposed to be like the 60% one. What is this? So yeah, Bailey Ober to me is relatively safe, and that's a cool thing that I go for in my rankings. Is I want safety of if I get this floor, I'm happy as my SP4, right? And then there's like a little bit more to add on to that. So that's Ober.
One thing that's kind of appealing is the low whip numbers, right? The last couple seasons, you're looking at 1.05 and 1.07, and the projections are like 1.17 kind of range. That's pretty
He's
damn
so
good
with command. He does that well.
You were gonna chime in there or something, and did I cut you off?
No, I've got him in a bit of a safe tier. I've got him near Jordan Montgomery and Merrill Kelly, like I said, and Berrios and Bassett, just like a kind of an oatmeal-y part of the rankings. I've pushed some guys that I'm super excited about, like Brian Wu and Bryce Miller.
Yes,
and Shota Imanaga, like above him, and they're riskier. So there is a little bit of a discussion if you're using my ranks, or if you're thinking about things about like, and you're coming to that part of the rankings. I think I agree that Bailey Ober's floor is pretty high, and I still couldn't pick him over Wu or Miller, but could I pick him over like Walker Buehler, who I have ahead of him? Yeah, depending on, like the most recent injury in history, depending on the rest of my pitchers. Do I like feel like I really need to get 160 plus innings out of my guy, then I can't risk babying. If I don't have an IL slot, what am I going to do with Walker Buehler, for the first couple
Well,
weeks?
you're not even going to get him in an IL spot. That's the biggest problem, is that he's not going to be an IL guy. He's going to be like in the minors or something.
Oh, yeah. Or they're, yeah.
right?
They're gonna do something weird with him.
But also with Ober, my pushback on you putting him like around Jordan Montgomery is, isn't he Jordan Montgomery but just a better whip?
I mean, we have even a better projected strikeout rate for him, so why don't I have him ahead of Jordan Montgomery? We have like
Guys,
the
don't draft Jordan
same
Montgomery. That's the
projected
one
ERA.
thing you should get out of this
same
podcast.
ERA projected ERA, and a better projected
innings.
Innings. I have 155 for Ober and 181 for Montgomery.
So I would actually say that with Bailey Ober, really this is just how I think about innings, guys. Is do I expect like Bailey Ober per start basis lower innings pitch than Jordan Montgomery? No, I think they're both just kind of around like cool. Like let's just say it's 6. Then is Bailey Ober not going to go every 5 days? Well, looking at the Twins, I see Joe Ryan, I see Bailey Ober, and Pablo Lopez. That's it. They are going to start him every 5 days
because they have to play games to the other 2 spots, so they can't.
It's just they can't afford that. So then I'm like, well, why would I project Bailey Ober for anything under than like 165
happening on air?
Right?
166, and I might bump him, but I'm not bumping the rank yet. I have bumped some other ranks while we've been on air. Blake Snell, by the way, went down a little bit.
Yes! Underneath Cole Ragans, right? Of course.
Cole Ragans actually stayed.
Oh.
All right, guys, we got a couple more to get through here. Let's talk Nick Pivetta. Nick Pivetta is somebody where the main problem with him right now is that his name is still Nick Pivetta. I mean, based on what we saw in the second half last year.
True.
If anybody else did what he did in the second half last year, it's like Tariq Skubal, top 50, top 70 type of pick. But because his name is Nick Pivetta, there's not quite as much excitement around, and you're actually still getting him at like 170. But what we saw in the second half last year was absolutely absurd. I have him at 46, Nick at 38, Eno at 51. Nick, you're even more excited than we are. I thought I was ranking him too high at 46, but
I was getting nervous at 50.
Nick, let's hear it. Let's hear it on Pivetta.
Oh, man. I love Nick Pivetta. Look, all the years that I was talking about Nick Pivetta back in 2019, actually, I wonder if it was exactly the same rank at 38, because at the time I was like, you have a good fastball and you just got to get something underneath it, like a curveball, slider, something that you can reliably
throw. He always had the good curveball.
And the curveball was good, but it wasn't like there always, and he would make mistakes with this,
and then command it very well,
right? And it was just always so frustrating. And then sometimes the fastball just got worse, and everything is stupid. Nick Pivetta is finally doing the things that we always wanted him to do. It's just there now. Not only does he have this whirly bird, which is a beautiful thing. That is what they're calling the sweeper in Boston now, which is easily this pitch that he's been searching for ages. He also has a cutter that to get strikes with too. And all of a sudden you have the complete pitcher that he's been trying to be for so long. It's not like he just did it for like 5 starts or something like that. Like, this is who he was. Traditionally, you can even say like August, like middle of August for the end of it. But he was also starting and not starting with a follower in times. All I'm getting at is there are moments when we want to say like second half numbers or end of the season, and does this matter? The only times that matters, I mean, you've heard this, guys, a ton, is when were there legitimate changes or not? And are those changes that we think are going to stick or not? Like sometimes you're just like, oh, his curveball was better or something. Like, yeah, I don't know if I can buy that one. But I can buy adding this new pitch and believing in it and having a completely different approach and having all the success with it. And now he's in a situation with the Red Sox where, they need him to pitch. They have like 6 guys now. They got rid of Sale. They got Giolito, who I think Giolito is my least favorite Red Sox starter right now. You have Brian Bay on there who's going to get a lot of those innings too. But at the end of it, it's really just a battle of Houck and Whitlock. And Pivetta now goes every 5 days. So again, when I talk about pitchers I want to go for as my SP4, I'm trying to find ones that go 180 innings could go and do that, 6 innings and 32 starts every 5 days, and have a floor I'm fine with and room for more. And I see that with Pivetta now. I just do. The only real hesitation I have is the fact that he pitches in Fenway, and that stinks. And I hate that so much. And that's really, really annoying. But I am a big believer in this new approach that he has. I think he has such ample opportunity to go every 5 days and just be that guy. And he's going at a time in drafts that is just phenomenal. And I have him above a whole tier of just like fine, whatever the oatmeal that you're talking about, and yes, Verlander is one of them. I don't care what you say. He is one of them. And then after that, you have the guys who wish they could have had the second half of Pivetta last year. But we had it. We actually have the things that we want him to do already. And the guys after that are like, Christian Javier, are you going to finish your figure out your slider or not? Like, please do it. That'd be great. You know, those wish casting ones. I want Ryan Pepio to do the high fastball now that he's in Tampa. Pivetta's done it, and he did it for 2 months. And this is who he is now with 180 innings, possibly for the next year. I'm so in on that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I feel like I should be in on it. The model says he has 6 pitches. He commands at an above average rate, which is so weird for Pivetta. That's not what you've had in the past. What is normal, and Stuff Plus has always loved his 4-seam fastball and his 2 breaking balls, his 2 old breaking balls. So, you know, I always thought he just needed to, you know, improve his command, which he did. And he had the sweeper. The 2 things that make me nervous are, yes, I think that Fenway is such a bad park. I did a piece about how people feel emotionally about mounds, and I asked a bunch of different pitchers, like, because you know, Chris Bassett told me the mound in Tampa Bay is taller than everywhere else. Book it. And of course, I talked to different mounds crew people, and they're like, "No, man, we get checked all the time. Like, it can't be taller." But there can be like sort of a feeling of it. And the way that everyone said that, you know, I did a poll where I asked people, what are the best mounds? They all said Tampa, San Diego. I forget. I just remember Tampa and San Diego being above there, and then Boston was worse. But when I started asking about why Boston was worse, they said the backstop is really close. The fans are really close. There's no foul ground. And foul ground is like a real thing, a tangible thing where I could get outs as a pitcher, but it also means the fans are in on your face. You just feel like the fans are in. The backstop is the fans are here, and the green monsters is hanging over your head. And I just feel like it's a kind of, this is a weird thing for me to talk about because I don't usually talk about this sort of stuff, but it's like a psychological factor that I think has really messed with young Red Sox pitchers' heads.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. But is Pivetta one of those?
At this point, Pivetta has a run of success, so he, at some level, has to feel like I can handle this. The other thing that's just weird for me is that this is not the type of fastball you normally throw a sweeper with. So, you know, I know that with Bryce Miller, he has like a high spin efficiency fastball with lots of vertical movement. He throws a sweeper. Everybody can see it. And nobody swings at it. And it's partially because the release point's different and also the mechanics are different. Normally, sweeper guys are like sinker guys with low spin efficiency fastballs. It's your traditional kind of frisbee to pair with your sinker. That's, if you want to think about it, people call it slurve. It's not slurve. It's a frisbee slider, and it's something that, like, you know, maybe Justin Masterson threw a sweeper and paired it with his sinker back in the day because he was a very sideways guy. Pivetta is a north-south guy who somehow just added the sweeper that's sideways, and it's working. Makes me a little nervous, but mostly it's a Fenway ranking. I have a projection that captures park factors, a 4.3 ERA projection, despite having as good of a Stuff Plus number as Bryce Miller. But Bryce Miller pitches in a park that, you know, makes you want to, you know, get a nice beer and cuddle up by the fire. And Fenway is like some intense death metal, like, you know, lasting behind you.
Yeah, but what if he loves death metal? There you go.
Maybe he's ready to rock. But it took him so long to like put this all together that I feel like maybe it's more fragile than we think.
That's interesting. I just looked up the release point for the sweeper of Pivetta versus his 4-seamer. Same thing vertically. A little different, obviously, horizontally, which doesn't surprise.
Around the side of the ball.
A little on the side more, but it's
Bryce Miller is 5 inches vertically and 5 inches horizontally.
Yeah. So that's good to hear then. Yeah, that's a good thing to see then for Pivetta, knowing that. And actually, to your point
vertically
about the 4-seamer not being a good general sweeper one, his vert is one of the highest. Actually, the last 2 years, there are 2 pitchers who tied for the most verts in the last 2 years.
There's no way I would have told this guy to throw a sweeper. I would never have thought of it.
That's why it probably never happened. Tristan McKenzie is the other one. And because I see it, like how they release and everything like that. It's not it's a better VAA, adjusted VAA for Nick Pivetta's. four-seamer, which is like,
Yeah.
okay, this is all right. Like I could get I get behind.
But it
this
is
a little
another
bit.
argument for if you're thinking about sleepers, you've got your Taj Bradley, Bryce Miller types who have great fastballs and haven't really figured out their secondaries. Like, Nick Pivetta is on that train where he's like, he had a great fastball, took him a while, he found the secondaries. The opposite type of sleeper is like Tanner Bybee, who has a great breaking ball, maybe
And
not as
changeup.
good of a fastball.
Right.
And so they're on, I don't know, the Merrill Kelly. There's got to be a better top end guy, but they're more on the like, Shane Bieber, Max Fried.
Right.
They're on the like, my secondaries are better than my fastballs, but I have great command of them all, and I'm going to mix them up, and I'm going to kill you no matter what my stuff plus says. But that's the Tanner Bybee train,
Well, Tanner Bybee, I don't think has good command. So so long, see you later. But no, I correction, by the way, Pivetta has elite extension, 7 feet, but the VA is terrible, which makes sense because he's throwing it really over the top to get that 19 inches of vert on his four-seamer.
That's a great discussion on Pivetta, and that's a great point about the park factoring into it and the mound. It's not something that I can say 99% of us probably ever think about, so it's good to add that perspective into the mix as well.
Cutter Crawford had a 6 ERA at home last year.
Yo, I love Cutter Crawford, though.
I know, we like Cutter Crawford. 6 ERA at home. That is a tough park. Sorry, Joe.
What was it on the road?
Like 2-3 or something.
Wow.
Always got to say, like, all right, is that random grouping or is it because of the park factors? And probably was part of the park factors. Maybe it was just, home road splits matter when you're a Red Sox.
I think it was in his head.
Yeah. That's Alex think fast, man.
That's a huge difference. Let's talk about the last pitcher on the list. And this is one where I'm going with my gut more so than the numbers here. It's Carlos Rodon. I have him at 27. I actually initially had him in my top 20, and then I pushed him down. Eno has him at 36. Nick has him all the way down at 50. For me, it's just I'm giving him a mulligan for last year. He never got a chance to really get going. He was constantly shut down in his rehabs, and there was the back and there was the arm, and there was just so much going on that he never really had a chance to get going. The other side of that is he still had 14 starts, but I just don't think that he had a proper lead up to the season, and I'm just willing to give him a pass. Even if maybe it's, I'm going a little too far in that regard to give him a pass, putting him in the top 30. But I really think that we're just a year removed from talking about him as a top 5, top 6 starting pitcher, and an injury-plagued season is not going to fully change that for me. Nick, you're real down on him at 50. You don't think there's a chance we can see Rodon get back to that Cy Young-worthy form?
Don't think there's a chance. Come on. Okay, there's obviously a chance. Okay. The way I do my rankings again, I have to say, okay, cool. Where's the point that I feel like I'm not going to drop him? I feel like, no, we're good. The floor is fine. And then I have my oatmeals. And then I have I think it's the tiers called $100 in the mall, where it's just you go crazy and just go get all the fun things. Because if it doesn't work out, I'm at that point where I feel like, well, I wasn't going to get something else that is going to be a legitimately productive value for me. So Rodon is at the top of that tier. He's the first one. And the biggest problem I have is saying, well, he had a forearm strain to go along with everything else. He had shoulder in the previous years, he had a back thing for a moment too. It was like all of these things, but forearm strain was the big one. That was in March, all the way until I think July or August or so. And then when he came back, he was never really getting his velocity until 2 games where he tallied 19 strikeouts combined, throwing 96 or higher. And then we're like, okay, finally you showed up. You're good. And what happens is final 2 games of the year, now it's down to 94. And then now it's down to 93 and change. And that's it. That's the season. And you tell that to me and I just go, well, clearly this guy isn't healthy. And there's more to the story. So what I believe will happen is March, he's going to be in spring training and he's going to look great. It's going to be like everything's fine. The helium will go up. I will have to say like, yep, or at least the velocity is here. That's already one of the bigger concerns I have. And I'll probably push him up higher. And then it's just such a high probability that there is something still underlying that's going to be a problem for him. He's going to miss a significant amount of time. However, if I do see that the velocity is already there, then I have to put him up into like the 30s or so, because the floor, at least, of production per inning is going to be there. I don't know if that's going to be there right now.
It would be nice to have a recent velocity reading for sure.
Right. And that's really what I'm waiting for at this point. Right now, without that, I can't put him into a place where I say like, I know the floor is going to be good. Like right now, he could be in spring training throwing 94 and they don't put him in the IL or something, right? And it's like, well, I don't want that version of Rodon.
Mhm.
So I want to give him all the reasons to say like, yeah, that was a fluke season, but I just can't right now.
Yeah, the back is just a weird one for me. I think the back really just sapped his command. Do you see that a fair amount of the stuff was still there? Like you said, he was hitting 96. He was hitting 96 in some of those games. So I think that it's more one of those not small, and back is not small, but one of those kind of non-arm injuries that sapped him of command more than stuff. And so I'm a little bit more upbeat about him, spending an off season working on that back and getting back into it wasn't I think necessarily a precursor to arm trouble. So I'm hoping that he can get the back figured out. That's basically my ranking, because there were flashes of the stuff that we wanted.
I'm hoping he's able to get back up there. I was so in on him last year. I think I had him ranked 3rd before the injury. And then I moved him down to like 20, just kind of hoping he would come back. And then it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. Who was a bigger disaster last year? Carlos Rodon or Alek Manoah?
Alek Manoah.
You don't have something to blame as much with Manoah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Guys,
just lost it all.
This has been a lot of fun for me. It's really great to celebrate this episode with a couple of fantastic pitching minds and a couple of great people as well. So thank you again for taking the time to come on today. I really appreciate it.
Congrats, Joe.
Yeah,
500,
congrats.
man. You did it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I hope I get to another 500, and I hope we'll have you guys on again along the way at some point. Again,
1,000, right?
Hey, well, we'll get to 1,000. We're a couple of years out, but somewhere in the 2020,
book it. We're back for 1,000. We'll
get you back somewhere in the 2026 season for episode 1,000. But I do want to give you guys just one more chance to let everybody know about all the great work you got going on. Nick, let's start with you this time.
Go give Joe a rating review on iTunes. Come on, do it. 500 episodes, guys. This is so much hard work that he puts into 5 days a week. That's unreal. Congrats, Joe, and make sure you go do that, especially if you're listening now. Like, come on, you obviously love this. Do it.
Yeah, I had a really good time. Thanks for having me on, Joe. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you at the different events and at Arizona Fall League. And I hope to see you around some more and have me on some more.
Hey, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know both of you guys. You've been two of the kindest people to me in this industry. Getting into it a couple of years ago, I had 0 Twitter followers. I was completely a nobody. And then with the kind people like you guys, I've really been able to kind of come a long way, I think, over these last couple of years. And that's in no small part thanks to people like you guys. I'm definitely going to be in Arizona. And barring some crazy event, I'm going to be there every single time I am able to. And hopefully, as I get older and get out of college and accumulate some more wealth, we'll be able to get to more of those other industry events, Vegas, and the rest of it. Make sure you're following Nick on Twitter at PitcherList. Eno, you're at Eno Sarris. You said it off the top, but just one more time, if you want to remind everybody about anything you got going on that you'd like to plug before we get you going.
Yeah, we got a podcast, Rates and Barrels. We got a cool announcement coming next week on Rates and Barrels, and got a podcast with some guy named Nick called The Craft. So both of those don't cost anything, and I reference articles I write all the time, so you can get a sense of what I'm doing before you take the plunge at The Athletic. So you can check those out wherever you find podcasts.
Free peek behind the wall there. You got to love it. Go check me out on Twitter at Joe Orico99. And we'll be back again Monday for episode 501. Not sure what's in store yet, but we will be here as always. Until then, everybody, take care. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.